So I'm sure you're going to love this. All right, hang in there. This is the last one, and then we'll be back.
Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Elaine Lowe, senior reporter at Variety, and I'm looking forward to this conversation today about authentic Asian and Pacific Islander representation on screen and how we can create sustained change. Let's introduce our panelists. We have actor and writer Sophia Ali, known for her work on Grey's Anatomy and as Fatin on the Amazon original series The Wilds, and the upcoming feature India Sweets and Spices premiering at Tribeca. We also have actor Stephanie Hsu, most recently known for playing May on the Amazon original series The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and A24's upcoming film Everything Everywhere All at Once with Michelle Yeoh. And lastly, we have casting director Julia Kim, who recently led casting for Minari and is also leading casting for the upcoming Amazon Studios and Blossom Films drama series The Expatriates, directed by Lulu Wang, the much-anticipated directorial follow-up to The Farewell. So welcome, everyone. And, I want to start off by acknowledging quickly what a tough year it's been on so many fronts between the pandemic and the recent waves of anti-Asian hate crimes. In light of everything that's going on in the world, how are you all doing?
Well, for me, professionally, I think it's a really exciting time for Asians, and we're speaking and celebrating all the achievements this month and on this panel, but definitely it's been worrisome, the random hateful attacks that are going on out there. So it's a combination of happy and excited and worried and sad.
Stephanie, how are you doing?
Thank you for asking. I have just been reflecting on, or the thing that keeps coming to mind over the last years, I feel so lucky to be alive. I just feel that it's kind of wild to even get to be on this earth at this time. And we started shooting for season 4 for Maisel again in January, and just feeling immensely lucky to be a storyteller with a job. And so I feel a lot of lightness, and also I think to Julia, there is also a certain heaviness too, with the year that we've had and what's still happening in the world right now.
And how about you, Sophia, over in Australia right now?
Yeah, down under. That was really what Stephanie said was so beautiful and sad at the same time, because it's why do we have to feel lucky to be alive? We are alive, right? That's the only thing that we know, but we have to feel lucky to have it. And so it's this tug and pull of when do I take a moment to educate someone? When do I take a moment to be grateful? When do I take a moment to learn? You want to be well-rounded, but at the same time, you just want to cry.
And I want to come back to the idea of that burden and responsibility when it comes to representation on screen. But I'd also love to talk about some of the bright spots from the past year first. And, Julia, what have been some of the bright spots for you when it comes to seeing our own faces on screen this year?
Well, I would have to say Minari is quite a bright spot. It's a piece of Korean American yumminess that was out there during this year of pandemic and political tumult, and to see people resonate to this slice of immigrant life story that came from all different backgrounds was extremely exciting and rewarding. And to see Alan Kim become a star and Stephen Yeun transform into a leading man, and to have a veteran actor like Yoon Yoo-jung collect an Oscar, I mean, all of that was unexpected and very exciting. And personally, working with this team was a pure joy. And also put this perspective for me to how brave my parents were coming to America when they did and how they did.
Mm. And what about you, Sophia? Oh, sorry. Go on, Stephanie.
Oh, I just have to say that, well, I loved Minari so much. And I do have to say that Alan Kim, kids are always so special, but he's so extra special. And I have to say that his Critics' Choice acceptance speech was kind of the biggest light I could have possibly imagined for this year. And that moment where he got overwhelmed and started crying, but then he just said, I hope I get to be in more movies. I was like, yeah, man, I hope that for you too. So that was just such a sweet, sort of simple moment of hope and what it's like going forward, in the sense of maybe it doesn't have to be all that complicated. Maybe he can just be in more movies, and make more things. So that was a bright light for me.
Yeah, Alan Kim, instantly iconic. And what about you, Sophia?
There's so much to gain from all of this representation, there's like so many opportunities for education, and it's so interesting how like every immigrant's journey is like their own journey. You know what I mean? Like what my parents experience is so different than, what Julia's parents experienced, I'm sure, And it's just so interesting to see these different perspectives and these different stories, growing up. Like I never saw someone who looked like me on TV, not once, And now all of a sudden, yeah, it's still lagging a lot, but I get the opportunity to be that person and look around and see other people, and it's great. It's uplifting. It's nice. It's like a silver lining.
And I want to talk about some of the characters, Sophia and Stephanie, that you've portrayed. Sophia, from your groundbreaking character on Grays to your work on the Wilds, there's something to be said for the kinds of representation that we see and the spectrum that we get, and how some of it is when you see it as a first, and there's something to be said for that, as well as when you see something that's just presented as the everyday without it necessarily being a thing, if that makes sense. And Stephanie, it was so wildly refreshing too to see a Chinese American character in a period piece where it's no accent, she can hold her own, she's got as sharp of a wit as anybody on a Sherman Palladino production. I wonder for each of you what that has meant, and where you're hoping to see that go. If Stephanie, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah. It was so funny. At the time before Maisel came in, I was actually in tech for a Broadway musical called Be More Chill. And Broadway was always a very huge surprise and accident. I always say it's an accident because I never expected to be there, because I was like, well, I'm not good for Miss Saigon, so I'm never going to be on Broadway. And so I kind of just deleted it from my path of possibility. And all of a sudden I found myself there, and I was playing, a romantic lead, and it was so special. And I remember it was in tech, and I was not auditioning, because tech for Broadway is you're at the theater day in, day out, every single hour. And I heard about the character May, and a few friends had kind of put in my ear, oh, this character is happening, and I think you'd be really good for it. I was like, okay, what character is in the 1950s Chinatown? I was like, okay. But then I read the script and I was like, this is amazing. And it's so silly. I mean, she was so smart. I had never seen a character like her. And I found myself, when I was describing her, saying, get this, she speaks Chinese, but she also speaks English. And it was this experience of never seeing that possibility before. I didn't know that both could exist. And I realized in that moment, and I think Julia was speaking to this a little bit, but there are those special moments where a project comes your way and it's written with such intention, or it's created with such intention, that the art is also healing the artist. And I feel that I didn't know that I thought I could never be in a period piece until May came along. And I realized that I had said no, or I had stopped myself before I had even read it, because I just thought, oh, that couldn't possibly be. So I feel immensely grateful for that character, because it is both historical, it is, Chinatown did exist. So it's a window into that real time of immigrants in America without pulling the wrong thread, and it feels exciting to be to get to step into her and be a modern woman of the late 1950s and early 1960s. And, my family speaks about it all the time. And it's just wild how much she has taught me of what is possible for me even. Yeah.
And what about you, Sophia?
It's so interesting to be like the first of something, the first person to play a hijabi on television and to make that character. I felt like I'm doing so much of my time avoiding stereotypes, avoiding like playing stereotypes and falling into them as a trap. But in some situations, I feel like I'm the orchestrator of them. And now I'm like, okay, how do I do this in a way that's not going to create a stereotype for people in the future? Like, how do I add my own unique spin to a character that people have no idea is? Like, a lot of times I'm just like, oh, this is just like super completely up to me, because you don't know what I am. Like, you just don't. You don't know how to tell me how to be. So I just have to create that in a really weird way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I imagine too, there's just so much responsibility that comes with that, and I wonder if you can speak to sort of carrying that additional burden, which is not something that actors who are not people of color necessarily have to contend with.
Oh man, I'm happy to. I don't feel like it's a burden at all. At all. Oh my gosh. Like, I feel so blessed, so lucky. Oh my God. What? Why me? Like, I don't think that I'm that great. That's freaking weird. But all I want is to just make me accepted so that other people like me can come and it's not weird, and they feel like they fit in and there is a place for them. Like, that's all I can hope for. And that is stressful sometimes, just thinking about that, because I do have to think twice about something before I do it. Because there is this long line behind me that I feel like I'm attached to, which can be hard. But no, I feel like the skies opened up and the heavens reached their freaking hand down and like grabbed me, and they're like, here you go.
And Julie, I wonder if you can speak to coming at casting from behind the screen, when what kind of stress or responsibility do you feel when you're looking at things through an Asian American lens, and also looking at casting for Asian American characters?
Well, I am a casting director, so it's my job to service the story. So that comes at me first, and ultimately it's my personal decision whether I want to come on board a project and the story that it's telling. But once I commit to that, it's really about servicing the characters, and it's a very collaborative process. I always try to work with people that are collaborative and where my input would be of value. So I don't stress about it, but I certainly contribute what I can. And certain stories have a very specific assignment, which was Minari, which was a Korean American story, and the kids had to be seamlessly bilingual, and those came with those challenges. But then there's projects that have a broader view where authenticity can be presented with a little more flexibility. And so it really depends on the project, but I'm always mindful of it. And also, having been in the business for as long as I have, which is like 20 years, I mean, the lists and the ideas and the actors that I'm now able to consider is just grown in such numbers that it's a very exciting thing to watch.
And Julia, what kind of opportunities and challenges do you face now when you're looking to find fresh faces, when you're looking to find new talent? And also, I mean, how has the past year, how has the pandemic impacted that?
Well, fresh faces come from a need for them. So again, it's about the story. And Alan Kim was a fresh face because there were not a lot of 7-year-old, 8-year-old boys to choose from in Hollywood. And now I feel very proud and excited to add him to the fold of Hollywood, and he's going to have these great opportunities. And then other parents and other kids are going to see this as an example and be encouraged to support their child if they show interest in that arena. And then as far as how the pandemic is affected, I mean, I'm working on something now, and I am global hopping on Zoom. And so I mean, if we were doing in person, I don't think I could meet Sophia because she's in Australia, and I would have to wait until she could get herself to where I am. But now, I mean, my director's in Hong Kong, my writer's in Australia, we're in Los Angeles. The talents are everywhere. I mean, I've been to Mumbai, I've been to New York, I've been to everywhere. So that part is, I mean, that just couldn't happen without the pandemic.
That's interesting because, I mean, obviously the pandemic has posed so many different challenges, but at the same time, the fact that we're all so used to talking on Zoom in some ways makes things a little more accessible and, opens us up to being able to, sort of do the self-tape or the Zoom auditions now. Stephanie and Sophia, what's your experience been like over this past year?
Well, if you wouldn't mind, I actually would love to speak to the question that you posed earlier about torchbearing and the burden, because it is a month of it is a month and it is a life of celebrating all the progress that we've made, but in the spirit of opening a window to an experience or improvement, I just want to say that I think to carry a torch or to bushwhack is as thrilling as it can be exhausting and scary. And I think all good artists want to leave the world a little bit better than how they found it. And I think sometimes you're also like, man, I wish I could just not think about these things, or the same reason why I'm always fascinated by when James Baldwin just left to Paris, because he was like, I don't want to deal with that anymore. And I have been finding that in this past year, I used to be like torchbearer on the streets, da 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 da. And I have found this year, I feel as hopeful as I also feel a certain kind of heaviness, because I grew up in an immigrant family, and my mom told me the narrative of all the violence that we're seeing. And I was the kid who was like, just give me gummy bears. Like, I don't want your weird mushroom soup. I'm an American. And there's some, and so I've spent so much of my life trying to defy that or know that another possibility is available to us. And I think this part of the heaviness of this time is that somewhere in the back of our minds, we've all been told this before. Like, there is something about this that is not a total surprise. It's still shocking, but it's also not a surprise. And I think that to find a way to feel hopeful and to push through that when you're feeling heartbroken is hard. And to feel like you've been speaking into a vacuum and now people are here to listen, there is an excitement in that as well as a fatigue. So I think it is a really joyous, hopeful, awesome time. But I wanted to speak to that question because I think it's carrying the torch. Sometimes you have to put down the baton for a second. And then there's like guilt in just wanting to, you know, eat a pie or Netflix and chill, Amazon and chill.
But yeah, there's a fatigue to it, right? And it's like we have these conversations. These are perennial conversations that we have when we're talking about tokenism in the industry, when we're talking about the need for representation on the industry. I mean, how many times have we heard that the one of the great days will be when we don't have to have these conversations, when these are things that are embedded in the existing power structures, and we don't have to really, you know, push the needle in that direction anymore. But to that same point, I'm wondering, what are some of the major challenges still that you all see in your work day to day when it comes to you know, doing the work of increasing representation? You know, I'd love to hear it both from an actor's point of view and, you know, from casting.
I feel like it's sort of endless and undefinable, you know? Hearing Stephanie talk, it's like, whew, that's one of the first times I've been like, wow, man, she gets me, you know? In a long time, like, it's so encouraging and like empowering to hear that there's someone else, like somewhere else in the world that's like doing the same thing as me, that's experiencing sort of a similar experience. And then also just making light of being able to put the torch down and like put all of that away, you know? It's nice to be reminded sometimes that that's a possibility. And people who don't know what that's like don't know to tell you that. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is just like sometimes I feel alone, you know? Like I'm looking around and I'm the only person who looks like me here all the time, you know? And I don't want to appear in any way like to cause friction, to be aggressive, to be whatever, because all I wanted is to just be accepted by these people, you know? And that's still what it's like. Like that was me as a baby. That was me as a child in my school, going to elementary school, you know, with my neighbors, trying to make friends. Like I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted to be normal seeming, you know? And it caused me to have so much resentment towards my Asian heritage, you know, and like not want to associate it to my character because I thought that that made me less cool, less normal, you know? And now here I am, almost in a way having to embrace it, which I'm happy to do, but I feel like a hypocrite, you know? Like I didn't grow up like that. I didn't. Like I didn't grow up like my dad. I grew up in America and I'm American, you know? And so it's like, but I also am Asian. And then to talk about that and make that so prominent, it's like, yeah, I want to, but I was ashamed of it my whole life, you know?
And so much of that is ingrained in us when we're growing up and we're trying to not make waves, right? And I mean, like, there's a real cultural element of that too. You know, how do you feel like that plays into the kinds of roles, Sophia and Stephanie, that you choose. Does that factor in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in terms of what you were speaking of in how that appears in Hollywood or how to improve it, I I think if I had a boom mic and I could speak to whatever population is dominating Hollywood right now, I'd be like, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions, and also hire a dramaturg. I think I see a lot of scripts sometimes with that have Asian characters, and then they're conflating different kinds of Asian. Like it'll be a Chinese nail salon, but then nail salon artist, but then she'll say things that are so they're just literally Japanese. And I'm like, who wrote this? And I think that it's okay to make mistakes, but I think that because Hollywood is trying to kind of make up for lost time and also catch up, there's a lot of apology that comes out not as apology, but like, oh, well, we know how to fix it. And the way to fix anything is to educate yourself, right? And to ask the people that you're working with, or ask the people who are directly impacted by whatever story you're telling, and to be unafraid to not know. It's worse when you are getting material that is offensive because someone didn't take the time to do the research or didn't take the heart to ask because they didn't know. So I would hope that in the more stories that are coming about all different cultures and genders, that there's a more, it becomes more status quo to ask questions and educate one another in a way that is compassionate and not about policing, but just about a desire to share story in the most honest way possible.
And to piggyback off of that too, when we're talking about the things that we see, the conflation of ethnicities, the sometimes ham-fisted attempts at representation. I mean, as actors, Sophia and Stephanie, what is there? What kind of challenges do you face in trying to bring that stuff up? I mean, especially for actors who are just starting out, that can be something that is so difficult to do. I mean, with where you guys are now, if there's something that you see that is potentially problematic, I mean, how do you feel? How do you approach that? Because I think sometimes people don't realize that, a lot of actors don't have as much leverage as they might think when it comes to really problem solving in that area.
I think, or at least I hope, that the time where people like writers are offended when you have some sort of qualm with the validity of their writing are just behind us, because like we're not going to know everyone's perspective. We're not. And like what Stephanie was saying, if we're not afraid of making mistakes and asking questions, then we can avoid that so much. And I noticed too, a lot of times they know they don't know, and they're writing these things and they're waiting for you to say something. And if you don't, then that's just what it is. That's just what it ends up being. And if you go and you're like, no, this is what it is, most of the time, I don't feel any sort of pushback. They're, yeah, okay, you know best, and for me anyway.
Also having writers that do know, having a diverse writers room where they do know what they're talking about. I don't want to take sole credit for the project I'm working on now with Lulu Wong. I'm co-casting it with David Rubin, who's a Caucasian man, and I was brought to collaborate with him so that we would get the authenticity right. And it's been a harmonious collaboration, and we're really proud of how diverse his cast is. And we have a Asian American lead, we have a South Asian lead, we have a crossover. There's just a nice potpourri of representation going on in what is one of Amazon's really anticipated shows. So it's just an exciting for me to be part of it.
Yeah, and I think I remember when I was first starting out, and I remember before people were talking about wokeness or Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate or any lingo. I remember walking into a commercial audition and the casting director asked me to put on an accent. And I was like, hey, with all due respect, no, this is not right for me. I speak regular English, and respectfully, but I walked out and I was sitting in the waiting room and I just remember feeling like, wait, this is crazy. I'm talking to you. You're an actor. Do you feel comfortable with that? And I remember this actor was just saying like, I don't have a choice, And I think it's just that is a false narrative, and it's part of the empowerment of, with grace always, but just remembering that we also deserve to be here and we don't need to pretend. I mean, acting is pretending, but it's also about being real. But, that we have it in our agency to also say, I actually think this perpetuates the wrong narrative, and I don't think I can be a part of that. And that was a huge thing that I think came to light during the pandemic, where, when things were really shut down and no productions were happening, even in Australia. And I just remembered everyone was stopped, and in Hollywood's desire to like push forward, I remembered reading scripts that I was like, when there was no vaccine in sight, no silver lining, I was like, I don't think I can put my life on the line to tell that story. And not that everything has to be like game changing. However, I think we're at this really rich time where we have a lot of responsibility as artists to really shift the narrative and create stories that challenge and inspire us to build a better world. And so it's also about that push-pull of, Hollywood can be such a hamster wheel, and it is a behemoth of an industry, which is why we even got to start filming again while there was a pandemic happening. And that's awesome. But when speed sometimes overtakes the value of the work, that is, I find, where the trickiness happens, where it's easy to just bypass things because time is money. And, then it just quickly, we just reverse all the work that we've done over this last even year and a half and 2 years,
And speaking of moving quickly, Julia, how many more projects come across your desk now that, how would you characterize the representation levels of the projects that come across your desk? I mean, has there, have you seen any kind of market increase or no?
I mean, the past 2 Oscars have kind of shown us that even at a mainstream level, there are more stories of diversity being told. But I would be surprised if you guys encounter tokenism or these kinds of accent type requests now. I mean, is that something that you guys still encounter?
I know. I was going to say earlier to what Stephanie was saying, like my experience alongside that, I didn't ever audition for something true to my own race until I was like 17. And I've been acting since I was 8, and I was just like walking around trying to be whatever they wanted me to be, because I could. And that character was a terrorist on like a major television show. And that was like, and I booked it. And I remember this like dilemma at the time being so much, I was like, what's important to me? Representation. That's what's going to continue to like feed this for me. Otherwise, what am I doing? And so then I was like, not going to do this. And that was so hard. Now, if that wouldn't come across my computer screen. But if it did, I wouldn't even give it a second thought, like absolutely not. Like I know now because of that I have the choice to say no, even though that was the first opportunity that I thought I actually even deserved, which is so messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like I don't see much more accent-y stuff, but that's also because I have a team that I love who knows not to ever place that in front of me. And I also do think that we have had growth there. Though I do think that stereotyped roles still really do exist. But I do experience sometimes, I think, especially with some TV stuff, I do experience, and at Sophia, I don't know if you feel this, but the role of the only, which is to say that you have a cast that is predominantly white, but they knew that they couldn't just do that. And so I do feel sometimes that there's like, oh, there's that one character that is the person of color. And that's okay. But sometimes it's really obvious. And that is an interesting thing to navigate. And it's not always bad, but it's present.
Yeah.
It's like a license you're carrying around, and people want that license to, like, oh, we have you on our show, so that makes our show woke. So now we have a license to just do whatever, but it doesn't really work like that.
I think it's kind of cute, actually. I mean, that's me being nice today, that's me being nice on camera. I do think it's kind of cute sometimes because there is that feeling of like, oh, oops. I
want to wrap it up with a question for all of you. The thing that I don't want to do here is put the onus on you guys to have to solve any enormous structural systemic issues. But, when we're talking about these things, again, this is just a perennial thing that we talk about year in, year out. How do we improve representation on screen? How do we create the systemic structural change? What is one, like, what's one like specific thing or one thing that you would love to see change? And I'm not talking like this is how we fix racism in the entertainment industry, but if there's just like one thing that you would love to see, what is it?
I would say that, show up, support, go see these beautiful stories and things being made that could use the support. And then once that is in place and the success is there, they know to make more. And I just feel like showing up and showing the support and telling your friends about it and sharing something great that you've seen so that the word spreads, and then also to be ready for when your own opportunity presents itself is sort of the best way to keep it going.
I'd be excited for artists and the industry alike to take more risks and push more boundaries outside of even just culture and ethnicity and gender, but just to constantly challenge ourselves to reimagine ways of telling stories, and therefore also the people we put in them. I think, we're blessed and also cursed with this influx of content. And I think that we have a real opportunity to just create new ways of making stories that we've never seen before.
I think that, like, speaking into the future, my hopes and dreams for people's minds and the way that they operate is that I just really want there to be a time when people allow other people to just be undefinable. You can look at someone and not have to say exactly what they are in your head and define them immediately. You can just let them be Like that would just be so glorious if we could achieve that somehow.
Yeah, I hear you. And, thank you all so much for just being here and showing up and having this really open conversation. It's been enlightening. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.